The Solara Prime Interplanetary Academy floated majestically in orbit around a central star, its gleaming spires and massive training domes reflecting the distant stellar light. Established as the most prestigious military training facility in the galaxy, it accepted only the most elite candidates from across thousands of worlds. Inside its reinforced halls, the air hummed with advanced technology and discipline so rigid it could bend plasma. Alex Ajax, Ryder stared out the viewport of his cramped quarters, watching the unfamiliar constellations. He was the only human, the only Deathworlder, in this year's class, and he felt the weight of that distinction with every labored breath. The artificial gravity was set slightly higher than Earth's standard, another small reminder that this place wasn't built with his kind in mind. Cadet Ryder, the Academy's communication system blared. Report to Training Hall Alpha immediately. Full combat gear required. Ajax sighed and turned to the imposing Mk7 armor waiting in his equipment bay. The standard-issue battlesuit stood almost 7 feet tall, designed for species with significantly greater physical strength than humans. Its metal joints groaned as he struggled to put it on, piece by cumbersome piece. 15 minutes later, Ajax clomped down the corridor, each step a concentrated effort not to topple over. His quarters were deliberately positioned furthest from all training facilities, another subtle message about where humans ranked in the galactic hierarchy. When he finally reached Training Hall Alpha, the other cadets were already lined up in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Unlike Ajax, they wore their MKVIs with natural ease, as if the half-ton of metal and circuitry were merely a second skin. Cadet Ryder, a deep, resonant voice called out, "Your tardiness disgraces this academy." Trainer Xyler, a Kthar warrior with obsidian scales and 4 piercing yellow eyes, towered over Ajax. The instructor's reputation for ruthless discipline was legendary, even beyond Solara Prime. "My apologies, sir," Ajax managed, his voice muffled by the helmet's respirator. "Apologies are irrelevant. Performance is everything," Xyler hissed. "Perhaps today you can demonstrate something beyond abysmal failure." Snickers rippled through the formation. The loudest came from Vrex, a hulking Drachner with crimson scales and a perpetual sneer. Since orientation day, he had made it his mission to ensure Ajax knew his place, at the bottom. "Today," Xyler announced, "you will face the gauntlet. Those who complete it efficiently will advance. Those who fail," his 4 eyes fixed on Ajax, "may find their academic futures reconsidered." The gauntlet was infamous, a labyrinthine obstacle course combined with combat simulations against high-level training drones. Ajax had heard stories of cadets emerging with broken bones and shattered confidence. "Begin," Xyler barked, and the cadets rushed forward. Ajax immediately fell behind. While the others leapt, climbed, and sprinted through the course with fluid grace, he lumbered awkwardly, struggling against the Mk7's overwhelming mass. "Look at the Deathworlder," Vreck called out, easily clearing a 3-meter wall. "Can't even carry standard equipment." A sylph-like cadet with iridescent skin effortlessly glided through a series of suspended rings. "Lyra," Ajax recalled. She glanced back at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Perhaps your world isn't as deadly as rumored," she commented airily as she passed. "Or perhaps you're simply defective." Ajax gritted his teeth and pushed forward. He managed to clear the first section of obstacles, albeit well behind the others. Then came the combat phase. Training drones erupted from hidden compartments, firing stun blasts that mimicked plasma weapons. The other cadets engaged with precision, their armor absorbing glancing hits while they returned fire or engaged in close combat. Ajax finally reached the area as most cadets were already finishing. The moment he entered, 3 drones targeted him simultaneously. He tried to raise his weapon, but the armor's response time was too slow. Stun blasts hit him from multiple angles. Warning lights flashed inside his helmet. In a real combat situation, he would have been dead several times over. He tried to adjust, to compensate for the armor's limitations, but each movement felt like swimming through concrete. After 10 excruciating minutes, he had neutralized only one drone by accidentally falling on it. By the time Xyler called an end to the exercise, Ajax lay sprawled on the training room floor, his armor systems in partial shutdown from too many simulated fatal hits. "Cadets," Xyler addressed the group as they gathered. Today's performance was informative. He brought up the scoreboard on the main display screen. Ajax's name sat at the bottom, his score so low that several cadets chuckled. "Most of you demonstrated acceptable proficiency," Xyler continued. "Some showed excellence." He nodded toward Vrex, who stood with chest puffed out in pride. Then Xyler's 4 eyes turned to Ajax, who had finally managed to stand, though his armor occasionally sparked from overloaded circuits. "And one of you demonstrated that perhaps certain species lack the necessary anatomical requirements for modern combat." The instructor's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Cadet Rider, your performance today wasn't merely inadequate. It was embarrassing." Ajax stood rigid, face burning behind his helmet visor. "I am placing you on probationary status," Xyler continued. "You have until the end of this week to demonstrate significant improvement, or I will recommend your immediate dismissal from this academy." As the cadets were dismissed, Ajax remained frozen in place, defeat weighing heavier than his armor. "Seems the Deathworlder can't handle real training," Vrex muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear as he passed. Later that night, Ajax sat alone in his quarters, helmet off but still trapped in the rest of his malfunctioning armor. The day's failure played in his mind on cruel repeat. "This isn't working," he whispered to himself. "I can't beat them at their game." He stared at his reflection in the metallic surface of his removed helmet. Earth had been called a death world for good reason. Its gravity, atmospheric composition, temperature variations, and indigenous life had produced humans with unique adaptations. Adaptations that were now being completely negated by equipment designed for entirely different physiologies. After curfew, when the Academy's main systems powered down for the night cycle, Ajax made a decision. He painfully extracted himself from the malfunctioning armor and slipped out of his quarters wearing only the thin combat undersuit. The corridors were dimly lit and monitored by automated systems, but he'd spent enough late nights studying to know the patrol patterns. He made his way to Simulation Room C, the smallest training facility, rarely used due to its outdated systems. Perfect for what he needed, Ajax activated the room's basic functions, keeping the power draw low enough to avoid triggering security alerts. He programmed a simplified version of the gauntlet and began to run it without armor. His first attempts were clumsy. After weeks of wearing the restrictive MK7, his natural movements felt strange. But gradually, his body remembered. The reflexes honed by Earth's higher gravity and more dangerous environment began to resurface. 2 hours later, sweating and breathing hard, Ajax had completed the basic course 3 times. His times weren't impressive yet, but they were already better than his armored attempt earlier that day. "What are you doing?" a small voice asked from the doorway. Ajax spun around, instantly dropping into a defensive stance. A diminutive figure stood watching him, barely 4 feet tall with pale blue skin and large, multifaceted eyes. He recognized her as one of the engineering staff who maintained the Academy's equipment. "I'm training," he replied carefully. "Without armor?" The small alien stepped into the room, fascination evident in her large eyes. "That's against protocol. Are you going to report me?" Ajax tensed, ready to make a break for it. Unauthorized training was a minor infraction, but on top of his probationary status, it could be the final push toward expulsion. Instead, the alien tilted her head. "My name is Tali. I'm a Xylosian. We're not built for combat either." She gestured to her slender frame. "They put us in engineering because our hands are good for delicate work, but the rest of us is inadequate for military applications." There was a hint of bitterness in her voice. At the simulation data on the room's display, "Your unarmored performance is already improving. If I may," she tapped several commands, and the room's holographic projectors activated. "Try again. I've adjusted the parameters to favor mobility over direct confrontation." For the next 3 nights, Ajax returned to Simulation Room C, and each time, Tali was there waiting. She fine-tuned the scenarios, offering insights on the training drone's programming and weak points that could be exploited without brute force. The Type 3 drones have a targeting system blind spot if you move at exactly the right angle, she explained, showing him diagrams she'd pulled from the maintenance databases. With your natural reflexes, you could exploit that. Ajax practiced relentlessly, gradually rediscovering the abilities that had been buried under the MK7's weight. By the fourth night, he was moving with a fluid grace that would have been impossible in armor, dodging blasts that came within millimeters, using the environment to his advantage, and neutralizing drones with precisely targeted strikes to vulnerable points. "You're ready," Tali said on the night before his final evaluation. "But are you sure about this? Going against Academy protocol so openly could mean expulsion, I know," Ajax nodded. "But I'm getting expelled anyway if I try to pass the gauntlet their way. At least this way, I get to show them what a human can really do." The day of reckoning arrived. Cadets gathered in the observation deck above the main training hall, murmuring with anticipation. Word had spread about the Deathworlder's imminent failure and dismissal. Xyler stood rigidly at the control console, his four eyes betraying nothing as Ajax entered the hall, fully encased in the MK7 armor. "Cadet Rider," the instructor acknowledged coldly. "Today determines your future at this academy. The gauntlet has been recalibrated to level 2 difficulty, a concession I rarely make. Begin when ready." Ajax took a deep breath inside his helmet. The familiar weight of the armor pressed down on him, but today it felt different. Today, it was temporary. He started the course conventionally, moving through the initial obstacles with slightly more confidence than before. He had practiced some techniques to compensate for the armor's limitations, and while he still lagged behind the standard times, he wasn't completely failing. Xyler watched him passively. In the observation deck, Vrex and his supporters were already exchanging amused glances. "Still pathetic," Vrex muttered. "Can't even clear basic obstacles with a difficulty reduction." As Ajax approached the combat phase, the section where he had failed most spectacularly before, his heart pounded. Everything hinged on what came next. The moment the first combat drone appeared, Ajax made his move. He stopped in the middle of the training floor and reached for his helmet clasps. "Cadet Rider," Xyler's voice boomed over the comm system. "What are you doing?" Ajax didn't respond. With deliberate movements, he removed his helmet and placed it on the ground. Then he began disengaging the armor's chest plate. The observation deck erupted in confused murmurs. Vrex's laughter cut short as disbelief replaced amusement. "This is a direct violation of training protocols," Xyler barked. "Cease immediately." Piece by piece, Ajax shed the MK7 armor. Each component hit the floor with a resounding clang that echoed through the suddenly silent training hall. Shoulder guards, arm bracers, leg plates, power core housing. Finally, Ajax stood in the center of the gauntlet, wearing only the form-fitting black undersuit worn beneath the armor. He rolled his shoulders, feeling truly unrestricted for the first time in months. "Cadet Rider," Xyler's voice had transcended anger into something approaching bewilderment. "You are in direct violation of." Ajax didn't wait for him to finish. He turned toward the nearest combat drone and nodded once, the signal to resume the simulation. The drone responded immediately, charging forward while charging its stun blasters. Two more drones deployed from ceiling compartments, their targeting systems locking onto the unarmored human. What happened next would be replayed on Academy security feeds for years to come. Ajax moved like water. One moment, he was standing directly in a drone's line of fire. The next, he had slipped aside with millimeters to spare. The drone's blast struck empty air as Ajax rolled beneath it, came up behind, and struck precisely at the junction where its sensory unit connected to its central processor, a vulnerability Tali had identified. The drone dropped instantly, its systems disrupted by the perfectly placed blow. In the observation deck, jaws dropped. Lyra pressed closer to the glass, her expression transforming from dismissive to astonished. "Impossible," someone whispered. The remaining drones coordinated their attack, creating a crossfire pattern that should have been inescapable. Ajax leapt, twisted in midair, and somehow passed through the narrow gap between energy pulses. He landed in a crouch, then sprang forward with explosive speed. In the control center, Xyler's four eyes widened to their maximum extent, his normally impassive face showing rare shock as the human moved with speed and precision that defied the Academy's performance models. Ajax wasn't just surviving, he was excelling. He used the environment as both shield and weapon, luring drones into positions where they obstructed each other's targeting systems. He climbed, jumped, slid, and rolled with a grace that made the other cadets' armored movements look clumsy by comparison. A Level 3 drone, not supposed to be part of this simulation, deployed unexpectedly. It fired a wide dispersion stun field that would have been impossible to dodge completely. Ajax took a glancing hit across his left shoulder. The undersuit provided minimal protection, and a patch of skin reddened with a superficial burn. He didn't slow down. If anything, the minor injury seemed to sharpen his focus. Within seconds, he had maneuvered the drone into collision with a training obstacle, disrupting its stabilizers. 8 minutes later, the final drone fell. Ajax stood in the center of the gauntlet, breathing hard, a thin sheen of sweat covering his face. A few minor burns marked where near misses had grazed him, but he remained otherwise unharmed. The scoreboard flashed overhead. His time wasn't just passing. It was the third fastest in the Academy's history. Silence reigned. In the observation deck, not even Vrex dared to speak. Xyler stared at the display, then at the human standing amid the deactivated drones. Slowly, deliberately, the instructor opened the communication channel. "Cadet Rider. My office." Immediately, the walk to Xyler's office was surreal. Cadets lined the corridors, staring openly at Ajax as he passed. Some looked scandalized, others fascinated. Lyra gave him a slight nod that might have contained a hint of respect. Tali waited anxiously outside the administrative section, her large eyes blinking rapidly. She gave Ajax a quick thumbs up, a human gesture she must have researched before scurrying back toward engineering. Inside his austere office, Xyler stood with his back to the door, for arms clasped behind him as he gazed out at the stars. "Sir, reporting as ordered," Ajax said, standing at attention. Xyler turned slowly. His expression was unreadable. "Do you understand what you've done today, Cadet Rider?" "Violated protocol, sir. Abandoned standard equipment. Disobeyed direct orders." "Yes." Xyler stepped closer. "And you've also achieved the third highest combat efficiency rating in Academy history." The Kthar studied him with an intensity that made Ajax's skin prickle. "Explain your reasoning." Ajax took a deep breath. The MK7 armor was designed for species with fundamentally different physiologies than humans. While it provides excellent protection, it negates every natural advantage my species evolved on our homeworld. In Earth's higher gravity and more hostile environment, humans developed for speed, endurance, and adaptability rather than raw strength. He continued, gaining confidence. By forcing humans to use equipment optimized for Kthar or Drakkar physiology, we're effectively being set up for failure. Today, I demonstrated an alternative approach that plays to human strengths rather than trying to compensate for our differences. Xyler was silent for a long moment. Then, to Ajax's astonishment, the instructor nodded slowly. "Your analysis has merit," he admitted, "though your methods were unconventional." "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted. Conventional methods were failing me, and I was facing dismissal. I had nothing to lose." A sound emerged from Xyler that Ajax couldn't immediately identify. It took him a moment to realize the Kthar was laughing, a rare occurrence from a species known for its stoicism. "Indeed, Cadet. A classic tactical assessment." Xyler returned to his desk and called up a display. "I have discussed your case with the Academy's Command Council. Your demonstration today has sparked considerable debate." Ajax braced himself for the worst. "The Academy exists to produce the most effective warriors in the galaxy," Xyler continued. "For generations, we have believed standardization was the path to excellence. Your performance today challenges that assumption. The instructor's 4 eyes fixed on Ajax. You are being reassigned, effective immediately. Ajax's heart sank. Reassigned, sir, to the newly formed Adaptive Combat Division. You will work with a team of trainers and engineers to develop protocols for species-specific combat training. Xyler's mandibles clicked in what Ajax had learned was a sign of approval. Your first task will be to draft a training regimen for future human cadets that builds upon their natural strengths rather than forcing them into our traditional mold. Ajax stood speechless, unable to process the unexpected turn of events. That is, unless you would prefer standard dismissal for protocol violations, Xyler added dryly. No, sir. I accept the reassignment. Good. Report to Training Hall C tomorrow at 0700. You will have resources to begin your work. Xyler turned back to his console, then paused. And Cadet Rider? Yes, sir. Impressive performance today. Perhaps there is more to Deathworlders than we have acknowledged. Word of Ajax's demonstration and unexpected reassignment spread through the academy like wildfire. By evening, the social dynamics had shifted noticeably. Several cadets from smaller or non-standard species approached him in the meal hall, asking questions about his training methods. Tali found him as he was finishing his meal. You did it, she exclaimed, sliding onto the bench beside him. I heard about your new assignment. The engineers are already talking about it. Some of them are furious, others excited. I couldn't have done it without your help, Ajax replied sincerely. It was good engineering, she said with a modest shrug, finding the optimal solution for the available resources. A shadow fell across their table. Looking up, Ajax was surprised to see Lyra standing there, her iridescent skin shifting through shades of blue and violet, an indication of complex emotions in her species. Your performance was noteworthy, she said after an awkward pause. I would be interested in observing your training methods. My people rely too heavily on our natural gliding abilities. Against certain opponents, we become predictable. You're welcome to join us, Ajax offered, genuinely surprised by her interest. Tomorrow, then. She nodded and departed with characteristic grace. The next morning, Ajax arrived at Training Hall C to find it had been completely reconfigured. Gone were the standard obstacle courses. In their place stood modular training zones that could be adjusted for different combat styles. Xyler waited inside, along with a team of academy staff, including several engineers, combat instructors, and medical specialists. Tali waved from among the engineers, barely able to contain her excitement. Welcome to the Adaptive Combat Division, Xyler announced. The Command Council has authorized this experimental program based on yesterday's demonstration. Cadet Ryder will serve as our primary consultant for human combat methodologies, while our team develops parallel programs for other species with non-standard physiologies. The Kthar gestured to a group of cadets waiting nervously at the side of the hall. To Ajax's surprise, they represented some of the Academy's least physically imposing species, beings with physiologies that, like humans, didn't align well with the standard combat equipment. These cadets have volunteered to participate in the first trial program, Xyler explained. They will train under your guidance, using methods adapted to their specific physiological advantages. Throughout the day, more cadets and staff members came to observe. Some watched with skepticism, others with curiosity. By mid-afternoon, even Vrex had appeared at the back of the observation area, his expression inscrutable. As the first day of training concluded, Ajax was approached by one of the senior medical officers, a Thesian with silvery skin and 6 slender arms. Fascinating adaptation, the doctor commented. We've been monitoring your vital signs during the demonstrations. Humans appear to have remarkable cardiovascular recovery rates and unusual stress response optimization. We evolved as persistence hunters, Ajax explained. On Earth, early humans would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, even if the pursuit took days. Days? The doctor's eyes widened. Without rest. With minimal rest, Ajax clarified. It's not about being the strongest or fastest. It's about endurance, adaptability, and problem-solving under pressure. The doctor nodded enthusiastically. This explains much. We must revise our understanding of human physiological capabilities. 3 days into the new program, Ajax found himself face to face with Vrex in an empty corridor. The Drachner blocked his path, crimson scales catching the light as he drew himself up to his full, intimidating height. Ajax tensed, ready for confrontation. "Your methods are unorthodox," Vrex stated, his guttural voice carefully neutral. "They work for humans," Ajax replied evenly. The Drachner was silent for a long moment, internal conflict evident in his posture. Finally, he gave a short, sharp nod, the closest thing to approval his species typically displayed to non-Drachners. "Perhaps. They are not without merit," he conceded reluctantly. "The smaller cadets show improvement." Before Ajax could respond, Vrex continued down the corridor, his heavy footsteps echoing off the metal walls. A week into the program, the Command Council requested a formal presentation. The Adaptive Combat Division had garnered attention far beyond what anyone expected, with instructors and administrators from other academies requesting information about the experimental methods. Ajax stood before the assembled council, 12 senior officers representing the major species of the Galactic Alliance. Xyler stood beside him, while Tali and the other program participants waited anxiously in the background. "Cadet Rider," began Fleet Commander Jerix, a venerable Tauran with silver-white fur and ceremonial cybernetic enhancements. "Your unconventional approach has caused considerable discussion among our ranks. Some see it as innovative. Others view it as potentially dangerous." Ajax nodded respectfully. "Change often appears dangerous initially, Commander." "Indeed." The Tauran's expression softened slightly. "Change also drives progress. Your demonstration has forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our standardized training methods may inadvertently disadvantage promising cadets from certain species." Another council member, a massive lithoid who appeared to be carved from living granite, rumbled in agreement. "The data from this week's trials is compelling. Cadets using species-adapted techniques showed an average 42% improvement in combat efficiency. There are practical considerations as well," added a spindly arachnoid counselor. "The resource requirements for standardized heavy armor are becoming prohibitive as we expand. More efficient, species-specific approaches could reduce material demands significantly." The debate continued for hours. Ajax presented data, answered questions, and defended the program against skeptics. By the end, it was clear that opinion had shifted decisively in favor of the adaptive approach. "The Council has reached a decision," Fleet Commander Jerix announced finally. "The Adaptive Combat Division will be formally established as a permanent department within the Academy. All incoming cadets will be evaluated for optimal training paths based on their species' natural attributes." He turned directly to Ajax. "Cadet Rider, in recognition of her contribution, you are hereby promoted to Training Specialist First Class. You will continue to oversee the human combat program and assist in developing parallel programs for other species." The announcement was met with polite applause from most council members and enthusiastic cheering from the program participants waiting in the back of the chamber. As the council session adjourned, Ajax found himself surrounded by well-wishers and curious officers. Tali bounced excitedly beside him, already suggesting modifications to training protocols for smaller species. Xyler approached last, his normally rigid posture slightly relaxed. "You have initiated significant change," Specialist Rider, the Cathar said. "It is not a small thing to challenge centuries of tradition." "I didn't set out to change the Academy, sir," Ajax replied honestly. "I just wanted to find a way to succeed on my own terms. Sometimes that is precisely how the most important changes begin." Xyler's 4 eyes studied him with newfound respect. "Your willingness to risk everything on your conviction has demonstrated a quality we value above all others in this Academy." "Sir." "Adaptability," Xyler clarified. "The true measure of an effective warrior is not their adherence to tradition, but their ability to adapt and overcome unexpected challenges." The instructor made the formal Kthar gesture of respect, a recognition rarely given to non-Kthars. Today, you have taught this lesson to the entire academy. 3 months later, Ajax stood at the observation window of the newly expanded adaptive combat training facility. Below, cadets from a dozen different species trained in groups optimized for their physiologies. Humans worked on endurance and tactical flexibility. Sylphs like Lyra practiced unpredictable aerial maneuvers. Xylosians focused on precision and technical adaptation. Tali had been promoted to lead the engineering division developing species-specific equipment. Her latest project, a lightweight, flexible armor system for humans, had just passed its first field test with remarkable results. Quite a change from when you arrived, observed Lyra, coming to stand beside him at the window. Their initially antagonistic relationship had evolved into a professional respect and, gradually, into friendship. It's still just the beginning, Ajax replied. There's so much more we can do once we stop trying to force everyone into the same mold. The next class of human cadets arrives next week, Lyra noted. I hear applications from Earth have increased threefold since news of your program spread. Ajax smiled at that. When he'd first arrived at Solara Prime, he'd felt alone, the sole representative of a species many dismissed as primitive Deathworlders. Now he was helping to forge a path for future humans in galactic society. Specialist writer, Zyler's voice came over the communication system. Please report to Docking Bay 3. The diplomatic vessel from Earth has arrived ahead of schedule. Ajax took a deep breath, straightening his new uniform, designed specifically for human proportions. Time to welcome the next generation of Deathworlders, he said with a grin. As he walked through the academy corridors, cadets of various species nodded respectfully or offered salutes. The term Deathworlder was still used, but its connotation had shifted from disparagement to a recognition of the unique strengths humans brought to the Alliance. Ajax paused at an intersection, watching a new group of cadets receive their training assignments. Each was being directed to programs that would develop their natural abilities rather than forcing them to conform to a single standard. One small, insectoid cadet looked particularly nervous until an instructor directed them to the adaptive division. The relief in their posture was immediately visible. That's what this was all about, Ajax thought as he continued toward the docking bay. Not just finding his own path, but opening doors for others who didn't fit the standard mold. The academy had changed and would continue to change. And somewhere in that process, the definition of standard itself had begun to transform. From a rigid expectation of conformity to a recognition that true strength came from diversity, from allowing each being to contribute in the way only they could. Ajax smiled as he approached the docking bay. He couldn't wait to show the new arrivals from Earth what was possible when you found your own way to excel, even if that meant shedding the armor others insisted you needed.